The Old School is brought to you by Ahart Solutions, which provides school surveys and applied research. More information at ahartsolutions.com. And good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Old School Podcast, a podcast about the American education system and all things in between. We're back. Good God, 3 weeks. It's too long. People have stopped paying attention to us. You don't think that's true?
Um, I'm not sure they remembered that we were here. They just stumble on us every week and say, "Oh, okay, I'll check that
There
out."
they are.
Yeah,
Well, it's a confluence of events as it has been off and on throughout this last month or so, but we're back,
yeah. We don't need to.
ready to go.
We don't need to get into the details of our personal comings and goings. Uh, I don't.
I don't mind. I was on vacation,
Were you?
so yeah. Now, usually we do these things while I'm on vacation, and we don't do them when you're on vacation. Uh, you have greater boundaries apparently.
Yes.
Uh, but uh, but this time we did not, and we missed the joy of talking about the state of Ohio.
I've been in Ohio. I lived in Ohio. I know Ohio. I like Ohio. Um,
We need to make sure we do that episode then. We kind of mix it in as part of our intermittent series on the states.
okay, Ohio. We'll put that in the queue.
Ohio, OH, IO.
Wow.
You know they say that, right?
I just developed after I moved from there a dislike for the football team in that state.
The whole state?
No, I don't mind their pro teams. I just don't like Ohio State University.
Okay. What about Ohio? What about Miami of Ohio or
Yeah,
Ohio University? Are you okay with those?
absolutely love it.
Okay.
No problem at all. It's just that one I have a little bit of animosity, and then it'll take about 2 or 3 lifetimes to get rid of that.
So, as a Michigan fan, you have lived in the belly of the beast.
Yeah, but I've never really been a heavy Michigan fan. I'm an Oregon fan, another team in the Big Ten that is suddenly right at the top.
So in keeping with your character, you dropped the allegiance, but you kept the hatred.
Well, it's a new hatred after that failed national championship attempt by Oregon. I just didn't, something about them bothered me. Arrogance, maybe. I don't like arrogance, and that seemed to be the vibe I was getting from
Hmm.
their fan base. But that's just me.
Now, are you excited about soccer, about World Cup, and all that stuff that's going on?
World
Or
Cups.
did you know it was happening?
Isn't that some like European thing that happens every 4 or 5 years when they think about it?
It's a global event. It's not just Europe.
But people run around and after 90 minutes, the Germans end up winning. That's what happens.
There have been quite a few stories about the impact of so many visitors and so many concentrated visitors of particular places juxtaposed into rural America or perhaps parts of America that don't normally receive this many visitors. And so there's been a lot of cool stories that come out of it, and it's fun to watch. And why wouldn't you watch it? The U.S. has as good a chance as any to go forward in this competition. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could. What are you laughing about?
Well, the in that first round, everybody it's like a bunch of antelope running around, and about one or two gets picked out by the lion, and they don't make it to the next round. I mean, you can
Listen,
move on if you just tie teams, 3 times, and you're in.
listen. I am going to go ahead and stick with the United States because
Oh,
I am a God-fearing American and I love my country and I hope that the team does well. Sure, we've not done well in the past, but being a Baltimore sports fan, I was already born with my heart pre-broken, so I don't really have to kind of to have to kind of relearn the sensations. You know, I'm just going to kind of go along for the ride and hope it does well. So.
okay. So yes, I've been watching. I've enjoyed it. I've actually watched more soccer lately than I ever have, and it's I like it because there's an end to it. It's very different than baseball if you think about it. The clock
Now,
is
why are you taking a shot at baseball?
no, it runs forward and then it's over. I don't like the extra time thing. That's annoying. It's a little bit whimsical at the end when they're going to stop it. They would kind of wait till the home team has a no chance of winning. But other than that little malfeasance and penalty kicks, I hate that. That's not sport. It's just like why don't you play dice or something? It has nothing to do with the game itself. Um, but I like that clock moving forward. I like the two halves. I like seeing those people running around, and there's enough action that you can't really stop watching because they could score, and then everything goes haywire. So it's a very exciting sport. The clock runs forward, and it's over in 2 hours. It doesn't matter what happens.
It's interesting you say that because there have been a bunch of complaints. You were talking about the two halves. There's been
Mhm.
a bunch of complaints about the obligatory hydration breaks that are done halfway between each half. And some soccer players, pundits, and certainly fans have pointed to a certain amount of economic skullduggery in an attempt to fit in more commercials or what have you so that FIFA can make more money. Mainly because you see the hydration breaks in every game, no matter whether it's hot or not, whether it's inside or outside,
Ah,
we're having these hydration breaks. And so, uh, some there are some soccer fans, some of the more long-standing ones, that smell a rat, as Patrick Henry once said when told of the Constitutional Convention. He said he smelled a rat, and I think that there's a lot of soccer fans who feel like there is something amiss and that something is coming down that will change the game forever. So I hope that's not the case. I do like the idea of two halves rather than quarters because it allows for a little bit more of a independent movement and flow by the players. But I guess we'll see after this World Cup.
yeah, I mean they think people are going to drop dead because it's 90 degrees or 95 or 100 degrees in Texas. And
We're playing indoors, so it's like it's in
yeah,
a
yeah.
dome.
So maybe they could be a little bit more nuanced. I mean, Europeans like their rules, and they're saying, well, it needs to be the same for everybody. No advantages. But if they said in the rule, if it's over 85 degrees and you're outdoors, you have mandatory breaks. Otherwise, you just play soccer.
Well, and that's the way it has been in
Yeah,
Europe. That's the way it has been. There's been like a limit, and once you get past a certain degree,
yeah,
then the hydration breaks go into effect. Until
yeah,
then, though, you just play the game.
yeah.
But that's not the way it has gone this World Cup, and that's why so many people are kind of complaining about
Well, we never complain about anything around here, Herr Miller.
it.
But
If we can remember what we're upset about, then we have a chance. We have a chance of not complaining about it.
well, I want to lead you down a path because speaking of remembering, um, it occurs to me that in your trip to Ohio, it's not the only place you went. And at some point during this very last trip, this last week or two, or whenever you were traveling, you went through the great state of Indiana. And talk about stirring up memories. Uh, did that solve? I mean, tell the world about your for about the 50th time.
God
Uh,
Almighty.
But why? I mean, why have you avoided? I've told you that anytime you go across the country, if you're going to Michigan, Ohio, wherever it is, you have to go through Indianapolis. There's no way around it. It's at the center, and every road leads through there. If you drive to New York City, you'll go through. It takes you through there. It's the center of any driving, and you've managed until whatever age you are to never go to Indianapolis or even the state of Indiana. Why would that be?
Well, because the quickest route doesn't always go through Indiana. We
It
actually had to
does.
do no, no,
You've
no, no. We
avoided it.
actually had to we had to no, no, no. Now
I've been
listen,
up
listen,
there 50 times, and every time I go
listen,
through Indianapolis. Every time.
listen. There is one trek to Cleveland that takes you through Indianapolis, but the trek that we took was quicker. And so, and we actually had to make a slight detour. So to say I drove through the state of Indiana is a bit of a misnomer because
You
I
wanted
didn't.
you wanted the
I
state. You wanted the state
yes,
and credit for the state, which shouldn't.
without the memories,
Yeah.
without the nightmares.
You could have gone through Indianapolis like you're supposed to, and Indianapolis stole your football team. We all know that. In
Yes,
whatever year it was, I don't trust this.
1984, for God's sakes.
And your lovely wife texted me and said, "We're in Indiana finally," and Ross is making peace with it. And my first text back was, "Have you seen any Mayflower vans yet?" How has he reacted to that?
And I texted you and said it's only a matter of time, although we weren't really in Indiana long enough to explore the rural wonderland that is Indiana. But
Beautiful place.
I'm sure it's a lovely place, and I'm sure most of the people are God-fearing people. It's a God-fearing place. But there is a center, a core, a rottenness that lies at the heart of that state.
Okay, so that memory hasn't faded. Is that what you're saying?
It's faded, I guess, but I mean, it's one of those things where, you never forget your first love. And so it depends on how that first love goes, that it becomes either a lasting, comforting and warming feeling
Hmm.
or a cold, distant one. And unfortunately for me, it's a cold and distant one.
So we see each other a lot. I mean, if you count the days per year that we see each other or talk on the phone or don't,
Yeah.
those two things, it's a lot of days, a lot of contact. And it would be easier to count the days where we don't talk about Indianapolis and Baltimore.
Oh, come on.
It comes up almost every time, certainly when I go to
You
your house.
brought it up.
Yeah, I do because I enjoy Yeah, I am guilty, but it comes up and you act like you're surprised and you react and it's beautiful. It's a little game we play, and then sometimes you bring up Lambeau Field that I've attended but never went to a game, and you've been there, and you
I've
just
been
have
on the field. I've been on the frozen tundra.
yeah, you bring that up too. Uh, but the point I'm making is we remember pain, we remember our regrets, and looking back in life, back to high school, even before that, those formative years, the things that we regret, we remember most. Missed opportunities, usually. It's rarely, "I shouldn't have done that." It's that, "Why didn't I do that?"
Right.
But the memory is a strange thing, and as I brought it up when we were talking before the show that I've been forgetting things, and it's not an age thing. I think I'm just, tired, from all that we just moved and all this stuff happening, that I rarely forget appointments, and if I
Right.
do, it's a big deal, and I forgot 2 appointments yesterday, and I forgot keys, I forgot all kinds of things, and, Freud would be all over that. They look at forgetting as some, psychological aggression or whatever it is. There's a lot to forgetting. Freud spends about as much time on forgetting as he does on dreams. They're both, you could talk about a Freudian slip. Well, a Freudian slip also is when you forget something.
Mhm.
Um, but
But see, I think in your case, as it relates to yesterday, I think it's easier to dismiss yesterday because it was a singular event that was the culmination of a bunch of different things coming at you at the same time. And so I think what tends to be more insidious is the forgetting where the things that you always used to be able to talk about and talk about extemporaneously no longer readily come to mind. And I think that scares the shit out of you. It scares the shit out of me when you have these moments, uh, where you should remember, you should be able to recall information because it's information you've talked about, you've debated, you've discussed, you've analyzed, whatever. and then all of a sudden it doesn't come to you. And you can write it off as age, but at 57, that's where I am. I mean, you just don't think of it happening this soon, but it does.
Well, I'll say I'm 64, just turned a little bit ago. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. And yesterday, when I was uh, moving, the moving place, and you go in and you have to put in a code, 6 numbers. That's it.
Hmm.
943069. And at the front, you need to put a star, and on the end, you put a hashtag. And so
Pound
technically,
sign.
yeah, so technically it's 8. Yes, 8 little touches on the pad. And I had it on my phone, and I looked at that phone about 50 times before I internalized it. Every time we went up the elevator, you had to put that code in. So I had a lot of physical, and that never would have happened. We would have put that, I would have put that to memory very
Hmm.
quickly. And I think
Hmm.
having the digital crutch didn't help. Um, but that worried me too. That forgetting things, wasn't able to process that number. I know our kids are bad at, and they don't have to remember phone numbers. They don't know their own phone number, or if they do, that's the only one.
Right.
I mean, like, I don't know your phone number. You don't know mine, probably.
I do know yours.
What? You don't need
See,
to say it out loud.
well,
Um,
no, but I have made it a point. Ever since ever since I first kind of gained an understanding of what the impact of technology might be. And of course, there's other events at play here. My father's dealing with dementia, and so,
yeah.
you have that kind of fear that kind of hangs over your head. And so I have made it a point of remembering as many phone numbers by heart as possible. I never do redial. I never on the phone. I always go through the 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 machinations of pressing each button of the phone number because it helps me make sure that I remember it. And at some point, it becomes muscle memory to a certain. At one point, it becomes muscle memory because you're just dialing the same numbers over and over again. And so, no, it's something that I've consciously decided to do over the last 15, 20 years, I think, to make sure that I remember phone numbers.
Well, I wonder where we would be if we didn't have Zoom, and if we weren't doing these podcasts. And I have about five. Well, no, let me 3 to 6 meetings every day, Zoom meetings. It
Mm,
could be sales meetings, that could be, brainstorming sessions, they could be all kinds of things. But I'm having these conversations all day. Some of them are sales pitches, where I'm pitching and demoing. Sometimes I'm presenting results for surveys, presenting to boards. But having to do that every day is definitely keeping me on my toes and keeping me fluent. If I were, imagine being retired, I mean, really retired, not talking all day. I
yep.
just wonder how quickly a person would go south. I mean, I'm staying on top of technology, on the cutting edge in some cases, and really pressing. But it makes me wonder about the dangers of retirement and getting into this repetition, and not talking to people a lot.
It's one of the things that I have consciously thought about and have tried to counteract because now that I'm retired, with no particular interest in doing a 40-hour a week gig anymore. One is the idea of learning stuff, and
Mhm.
so I my book reading has picked up tremendously.
Yeah,
Two is talking to people, which is helped by the fact that my in-laws with me live with me, my daughter's with me, and so even if my wife's at work, then I still have the opportunity to have conversations and what have you. I'm not sitting in a room by myself.
right.
And so, uh, but I think that the notion of forgetting is the thing I'm most fearful of.
Mhm.
And so I do a bunch of things. I have like a list of activities that I do that are designed to test my memory. And again, this is all based on fear of dementia at some point. You know, the notion of me drooling, eating Jello in a nursing home, and just it fills me with dread.
Don't do
But
it.
they know. Say again.
Don't do it. Don't go.
But the idea though is that constantly testing my memory, constantly trying to learn stuff, constantly reading, conversations, as much as I can manage. It's it's an active weekly plan that I have for myself.
Mhm. So the process of, I mean, you're keeping the capacity to learn, to remember in the short term, but also this long term thing is always happening.
Mm,
To be around for this long, you gradually forget things, and I think forgetting is incredibly important, and that's the other side of it. Some people, myself included, you can dwell on mistakes,
mm,
like I was dwelling on forgetting keys yesterday, or
yeah.
just anything. You could misspeak. You could insult somebody without intending to. There are a million things, and how do you let things go? Because that's a type of almost intentional forgetting that's really important, or you become completely psychotic all day, you know, just fixating, because you can fixate on everything, almost
Mm.
every thought and every moment. But it is a skill, and it's a survival mechanism. And if we were think about when we look at a dog, they're aware of everything around them, and just everything is new and a little bit
They
threatening, you know.
they seem to forget and take in simultaneously.
Yes, and I think we do too, but it's a survival mechanism because we do know when to focus.
Mm,
We have to, or how could you drive? All
yeah.
this going on. So no matter what happens, and then you have somebody next to you talking to you, your mind's processing that conversation. We shouldn't talk at all when we're driving, I don't think. We're listening to audiobooks, and our mind is not as sharp. And
Yeah.
that driving is basically mental. There's a little bit of physical stuff.
Yeah.
But we're kind of overestimating, but I do think that the idea of blocking things out is really crucial, but at the same time, it's tragic, that our experience, kinda melds into this, um, narrative that it gets blurry, and then eventually, 10 years become just one experience.
I think the notion of being able to function well does require a certain degree of forgetting. The sports analogy, never let the same defeat you twice kind of a thing where, you lose once and then the memory of it leads you to lose again. I have that to a certain degree, but you brought up a scenario that I struggle with the most, and that is, since I was young, my father always said that I had the gift of the gab
Mhm.
and that I had the ability to talk extemporaneously. I had the ability
Yeah.
to speak about anything,
Mhm.
at length and have it make sense. And so when I misspeak, or more impactfully, if I say something that I think someone else took the wrong way, or if I felt like I said something that made someone feel bad about themselves or whatever the case may be, that will torture me.
Yeah.
And it will torture me. I almost have to talk to that person right away to kind of set
Yeah.
things, not necessarily to explicitly apologize, but just to try to set right the conversation
Yeah.
because I will obsess over that for days until at some point my mind just says, okay, just let it go. And then I'll let it go. But you have this moment where at least I do, where I just obsess about the impact of my words. As teachers, we know
Mhm.
that how we speak to kids has an impact on how they experience that and how they experience it going forward and their ability to forget, and so that's always been an obsessive
Mhm.
thing to me.
Well, there's something about having really close friends, and I'm talking about 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 in your life, where
Right.
you know, like us, I mean, where you've gotten past any question, because there's all
Mhm.
this currency and trust that build up over time.
Right.
I think that's the comfort that you can risk saying stupid things because everybody knows the intention is always what it
Right.
is. But so
Right.
many people don't have enough context. And so, yeah, they could always misinterpret or just the tone or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I feel the same way. And some people are comfortable, and some teachers are. Teaching is so sensitive. You say one thing and it affects one student one way and one another, and
Mhm.
you constantly don't want to offend a kid, and it's just the tone. I mean, they're just
Mhm.
hypersensitive, and we know that, um, for sure. But I was also thinking when you said that the sport of tennis particularly is a beautiful sport for compartmentalizing because even if you beat somebody 6-2, 6-1, or straight sets, easy
Mhm.
dominant win, you're going to probably lose 45% of the points
Mhm.
in the match. You actually lose. You're defeated on that many points, and then you have a resounding win. That's the beauty of the scoring system. Um, but you have about 30 seconds between when one point ends and then the next serve happens. And they even have a timer in the pros now, so they can't walk around for hours.
Mhm.
But if you watch somebody and like Roger Federer, he was known for this more than anybody, I think. When he makes a mistake, he feels it, acknowledges it, internally pissed, never shows it to the world, but still inside, yeah, I blew that. And then shifts to the next point mentally, body language, everything, and then it's all new. And they say that about quarterbacks with a short memory, but tennis happens. You actually lose points,
Mhm.
and you just recover. I mean, I guess all sport has that to some extent, but there's
Mhm.
this clock in tennis, different than say golf, where you walk around and stew a little bit, and then you lock in.
Mhm.
But I like watching golfers lock in too,
Mhm.
because they could go down a hill, and amateur golfers just beat themselves up and they're out, you know.
Right.
But tennis has this forgiving thing because of the scoring system where yes, you messed that up, but now you can equalize it with one strike of the ball.
Mhm.
But I like that mentality. I think it trains this humility and forgiving of yourself. Um, but it acknowledges it, and that's the great players acknowledge it first, and then that transition is beautiful to watch.
That said, it's interesting to try to figure out, and maybe you can't always do this with certain things, and that is try to create for yourself a rule about the things you should forget, the things that you should never forget, the things that you should hang on to for a little bit, but then let go. I think about, the in the Jewish faith, they have something called Kaddish, which is the prayer for the dead.
Mhm,
And so every Sabbath, when you go to shul, then you will say Kaddish for whoever died.
mhm,
You are allowed to publicly mourn, and that doesn't mean that you're walking the streets crying and putting dirt on your head or what have you, but it could be something as symbolic as like wearing black.
mhm.
But then after a year of the death of that individual, you are not allowed to say Kaddish anymore. You're not allowed to show public mourning
Wow.
because from a health standpoint, and perhaps that's why the rabbis devised it this way. There has to be a point where you let things go,
Mhm,
um, and so you think about something like that. Okay, you remember it, but then at some point, not that you forget, but that you have to kind of move past it.
yeah.
And so you look about the things that you should hang on to for a bit and then use it and then move on. The things that you should never let go, you know, uh, it's not something that anyone ever sits you down to talk about.
Right.
Mainly because I think history is a subject for the long run. I think most kids have a hard time grasping the importance of history because they're too
Mhm.
young to get it yet.
Right.
And maybe the notion of forgetting and what to forget and what to let go and what to use. I think that's something that you can't figure out until you're older, or you can't appreciate until you're older.
Hmm. Well, the idea of mourning is, I mean, you can, in the stages of grief, which seem to be to make some sense,
Mhm,
particularly the anger part, uh, happening very early. Um, I can get behind that, but in a way, anytime there's some life change, you go through it. I mean, we just moved from a home where we lived for 10 years and our kids went through their formative years. That's a grieving process.
sure.
And so I'm probably in denial of that and all that happened in that home where this other nice family is now setting up shop. That's a
Mhm,
type of mourning. And and
mhm.
and it's easy to kind of downgrade that, make it, lighter than it is, but it's a big piece of your experience, and just like when kids go off to school, you go through that, but I think we do that in little ways all the time.
It's interesting you bring that up because I think it's someone told me one time that you talked about the anger bit,
Mhm.
about the thing that made this one guy I was listening to, he was talking about how angry he got because he saw everyone else getting on with their lives.
Right.
That life goes on. That family that's in your
Oh.
house right now, they may be having a little bit of grief of their last house or their last situation, but they're also confronted with this joy and this new future or what have
Mhm.
you. Everyone is going through their life. The world doesn't stop just because you suffer this, that, or the next thing.
Right.
And it's one of the things that I'm having to learn to talk to my daughter about, as far as how do you move past things? How do you not necessarily to forget, but to use in such a way that you can move beyond it. And I told my daughter what my father told me. No one cares about your feelings. No one cares about what you're going through. But you're still going to be expected to accomplish things, to do things. You're still expected to kind of live your life, to enjoy your life as much as possible. And I said, you'll always have your family, you'll always have your friends for the feelings and those emotions. But that beyond that, you're surrounded by a bunch of people that are just going about their life. And what happened to you has no effect whatsoever. You think about the people who in Venezuela who still don't know whether their loved ones are dead or alive or what have you. For them, the entire world has stopped.
Right.
And the reality is the entire world has gone on. And for a lot of people, blithely unaware of the suffering and misery that's happening in parts of Venezuela today. And so, it's a fine line between being a psychopath
Oh,
and being someone who's socially aware, of the things that maybe regrets or whatever the case may be that you should or should not hang on to.
there's a beautiful song, not to make light of Venezuela, but called "The End of the World," but an old song called "Don't They Know It's the End of the World?" Uh,
Mhm,
and it's talking about when, that someone left them basically. And
mhm,
so for that person, the world has stopped,
mhm.
and everybody else is just kind of blithely going. But if you multiply that out, everybody's in that situation, and so the reaction and the lesson should be this empathy and realizing that the people that you encounter could be going through all kinds of things, and be give people a little more grace and be kind because they're probably going through things in some level that they're covering up as well.
Was it Camus said that most people don't realize that some people extend extraordinary amounts of energy just to appear normal?
That's great.
And the idea that
Yeah.
so the idea that, the idea that every person you meet is dealing with stuff, and, uh and just to be aware of it, not to necessarily give it leeway or whatever the case may be,
Right.
because it may not always be possible, but, at some point, they're gonna have to put that behind them, and whether that means forgetting, which doesn't seem healthy, or just simply stowing it away
Yeah.
might be the best path to take.
It's always good to acknowledge. I mean, it happens on Zoom calls all the time. Someone will say, "Well, I just had a relative pass away," or something, and you don't just keep driving at that point.
Right.
You always say you're sorry for their loss, and it's easy to forget. The fact
Hmm.
that they're saying that means that they're experiencing something, or they wouldn't bring it up.
Hmm.
It's worth doing. Um, on this topic, I guess to get on the a little bit on the philosophical side, there's something that Martin Heidegger calls the call of conscience. And it's a type of forgetting that's a little bit different than what we're talking about. It's about forgetting who you are in your essence and getting torn away over time and drawn into the world and the petty things and the media and all that involves, public life and responsibilities. And then there's that self of yours that gets sort of washed away over time with experience and responsibilities. And he says that at some point, and it could be at any time, and but typically older, that call happens. So it's a call to it doesn't come from the outside, it comes from you. So you are
Hmm.
the caller and the receiver of this sort of memory of remember who you are.
Hmm.
And it's there. It hasn't gone. Our particles have gone and replaced themselves, but there's something in there that that does get chipped away at. And that's part of living and having families and having jobs and responsibilities. But to remember that's a different type of remembering, I guess. And
Hmm.
I think about that quite a bit, because you have so much time left, and you know, when do you hear that call and start to, think about your identity?
I think the worst thing would be if you receive that call only to find out that where you are now is not where you were meant to be, or maybe perhaps not where you should be.
Mhm.
And it's so I can't say as I've had such a revelatory moment, although I do live in my head a lot. So
Yeah.
perhaps, it's part and parcel. It's been with me my whole life. But I think, I'm thinking about the thing that popped in my head was there's a story about the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, and that he had just had he had just got married like a couple years before, and he just had a baby boy, and he's living this rather gilded life of a Hindu prince, and he receives a call, perhaps a call of conscious, but got call from God or what have you, that tells him that there's more to life and that he's not in it currently, and he makes the rather radical idea to leave his wife and child behind, never to see them again. I think for Buddhists, it's always kind of an uncomfortable question of how do you square that with, the principles of Buddhism. But
Right.
I don't know how many people would have the guts to do that, or I wouldn't even want to do that, where they receive that kind of call, where you find out that what you're doing or where you are is not where you were meant to be.
Mhm. So it's almost something wordless. We think in words. That's how
Mm,
people think. But it's more of a feeling, some sense, some sensation that happens. I don't like well, I mean, people say, God told me to do this, God told me,
yeah,
that makes me uncomfortable. I think that something that comes from within that's less explicit, seems to me more genuine and more potent, I guess.
right.
Um, but you made an interesting point that that it's not like it's calling you to the 18-year-old version of yourself,
Right.
which is somebody that you probably wouldn't have a lot of patience with right now. You'd have maybe some sympathy and a good laugh or two, you know, or maybe you'd want to mentor that that
Mm,
so the self that's calling is still developing. So it's really kind of a radical idea, and as are most of Heidegger's thoughts. But but
Mhm,
but he's saying that it's very common to be sucked into he calls it the public, the what do they call it, samsara, in the
mm.
idea of the world and all of that implies. And at some point, you you need to reclaim, that essence. And so when I think of forgetting, I think of silly things like forgetting keys, and
Mhm.
I can live with that. I can forget an appointment, but I don't wanna, forget this self as I get older. That would be tragic to me.
You don't wanna forget who you are.
Yeah, 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 because you spend so much time, becoming who or what you are, you know,
Right.
framing that, only to forget. And that's another tragedy when somebody dies, all their knowledge and, all their wisdom, all the accumulated self, goes away. So I think, as we get older, I mean, you're taking heroic measures with, with some of these techniques that you're using to remember. We need to remember
Mm.
the important things, not, our friendships and family, but also, ourselves.
I think it can be challenging though.
Mhm.
You often hear stories about how and they always coin this, in terms of the mother, although, I'm willing to give the father some pub as well, but the fact that oftentimes we live for our children and we put aside the things that we want, we put aside the things that
Mhm.
we need
Right.
in order to do what we need to do for our kiddos, and perhaps that's the way it should be. But I think maybe the reason why this call to conscience might be something that's associated with, you know, uh, someone in their older years is because now they're freed from a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the obligations that they have to give service to others. And now they are in a position where they can spend at least a little time on themselves.
I hope so. I I hope there's still time. But yeah, a call of conscience. I think it's different than what it sounds like.
How so?
Well, when you think of conscience, it means, you should feel guilty about the way you're treating people, or, your behavior, but it's something very, very different than that. So it's about who you are, and you're not being true to that, as opposed to behaviors. It has nothing to do with the external world or the other at all. It's just bringing you back to yourself. Um,
Reorientation.
yeah, I mean, there's a controversial but sort of beautiful idea of eternal recurrence of Nietzsche, where he has this theory where all things will repeat. If you're positing a finite universe and infinite time, eventually things will repeat, and the sequence of your life will repeat as it is multiple
Mm.
times, an infinite number of times, actually. And I think he's creating an aphorism of how important the moment is. I think that's the reason that he came up with that. But think about the weight of each moment if it's going to be repeated infinitely. So he created a parable with that. But also, to me, it just reminds you, of that self that will return according to Nietzsche's theory and is in there all the time. So there's a lot of, he calls it weight, to every action, every choice, but also the core, is infinite. And I love the notion. I don't think he conceived it as a physical, physics type theory, you know, but it does frames everything.
What do you think it is that people perceived his idea to be that made it so controversial?
Um, That would need a long podcast, but it's really an anti-narrative to the Christian narrative, where you're
Mm,
living for a future, yeah, eternity, and you're living your life morally and being judged later based upon the fruits of your work and your thoughts and all of that. And he's so it's a very much it's not an otherworldly approach. It's actually honoring every moment as self-important and not acknowledging any payoff later. The moment and
mm.
the eternal sequence is all there is.
Do you think the people that talk about living for the moment and seizing the moment and trying to understand the moment in which we're living in as we do, have they caught up with Nietzsche, or is that kind of trite axiom that's bandied about a lot? Is that missing the point of what he's saying?
Yeah, totally. Uh,
Mm,
because he's not talking about pleasure, you know,
right.
enjoy the moment, it's always about knowledge and understanding and will. For him, happiness is not about pleasure. It's about overcoming obstacles,
Mhm,
and generating knowledge and understanding, truth.
mhm.
That's what he came to do, not for pleasure.
You go back to something you said earlier. I think about my life as an historian,
Mhm.
and it, I it hurts me when I think about the fact of people dying and people not remembering what those people did.
Right.
And and being in the moment means to fully experience not just the pleasures, but also and to fully experience the pain and the misery, so that you have that because it goes both ways. You can't have a kind of a one track kind of idea of the past. And so, as an historian, I do think about the notion of what we lose.
Mhm.
You hear stories about the last World War II veteran dying, and or I remember, I had scheduled years ago. I had scheduled a World War One vet to talk to my students,
Yeah.
and he died. I think about a month before he was supposed to come to my classroom.
Yeah.
And I remember even then, even though I was much younger and not quite as reflective as I should have been, but even then I realized, and I talked to my students about it,
Mhm.
and they were upset. They were sad. I guess they missed out on a chance of hearing a voice different from my own. But I also tried to make sure that they understood of what's actually been lost. That this guy has died,
Right.
and it's something that we have to embrace. We have to kind of remember, um, you know, that fear of forgetting. It cuts both ways. Both in forgetting it, but then also the of what we lose when we forget. So,
That's a wonderful idea for history,
mhm,
because what happens over time is that the story gets simpler. It also becomes politicized. It becomes a fixed narrative, and there's an individual behind that is very complicated, and the historian can bring
mhm,
that out, and that's what we need. We
mhm,
don't need those box, cookie cutter descriptions and
right,
timelines. We need to know
right,
that this is complicated and it came from individuals, and to get that, you have to read. I don't care what anyone says. You have to
mhm,
read history and
yeah,
not just summarize it with AI. You need to get your hands dirty by reading the voice of the historian and how they tell the
mhm,
story through
yeah.
their lens.
Well, an interesting topic that was born out of a stressful day for you,
It was terrible.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
it was terrible. And the worst part, maybe, was I missed your party. You had a party.
No, no, it's all right.
No, you did, and I like Mr. Miller's party, so it's a singular experience. Um, but, yeah, things are gonna get better because I'm gonna start doing some of those drills that you do. I don't know about the telephone thing, uh, but but what are those little cards where they? I mean, you can have memory cards where you say
Like
words.
flashcards, like, yeah. What was that game, the memory game where you flipped over one card and it was like a train and you had to find the train that you had to remember what the train was that you found earlier and
Yeah, I'm really bad at directions, so if anything with that, I'll just forget immediately.
what, talk about we drove to Ohio and it's like, for my wife, she depends on Google
Mhm.
Maps to kind of direct her.
Right.
To me, I like to look at a map. And the map could be a physical map, that would be better if it was, but if it could be a physical map, it could be a map on a computer, but I like to see where the path goes and then have that in my head so I don't have to constantly go to the map, and so it's always these mental exercises that I try to do for myself to be able to remember stuff, just so that I
Yeah.
don't just fade away, so
You're a beacon of restraint and car crazies.
we'll see how it goes, but, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We are glad to be back. Who knows if we'll be back next week? I think we will, though. So we'll be back next week to talk about something fun. Maybe one of the states, maybe Ohio. Who knows? But with that, I shall say adieu, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Auf Wiedersehen, Herr Müller.